So, what if I told you that one of the reasons most jewelry reselling businesses fail within the first year is not because resellers can't find amazing, beautiful jewelry pieces, but it's usually because most jewelry resellers, when they're starting out, don't have a solid plan. Now, I'm not going to say that you can't be successful just jumping right into this business, but having a plan, having some direction, and some goals and some expectations really can help you navigate this journey a lot easier and maybe in a much more profitable way. So that's what we're going to talk about today, jewelry friends. Hello. My name is Desiree, and you know that I am your jewelry reselling bestie. All right. So, like I said, I see it all the time. People start selling jewelry because they love the sparkle, they love pretty things, they love the thrill of the hunt of finding, sourcing, and buying jewelry. But translating that into a long term sustainable jewelry reselling business definitely can be a challenge. And I know when I first started, it wasn't easy. I was pretty much figuring out things as I went, with maybe some success here, maybe a little bit of not too much success there. But in today's episode, I really want to break this down. That way, if you are trying to create a business, a jewelry reselling business specifically, that is sustainable and has a lot of long term potential and growth and even stability. This is the episode you're really going to want to watch because I'm going to cover all of the things that I think will take you from startup to sustainability as a jewelry reseller. Some things you may have heard before, some things you may have never heard before, and some things you want to, maybe consider and make some decisions about as you are moving through this journey. Now, one of the things that I like to focus on with this podcast is that we are here to make money, and that's always the goal. Now, for some of us, we may be doing this for a hobby, a little side hustle. Maybe we just enjoy jewelry, and this is one of the ways we can indulge that passion. But I'm going to talk about coming from the vantage point of how can we do this in a way that's going to make us the most money long term, because that was always my goal when I first got started as a jewelry reseller. There were a lot of things that kind of came into play when I made the decision, and over time, things have shifted, things have changed as I have learned and I have grown as a jewelry reseller. And so I want to share some of those things. So if you are just getting started, I think this is going to be a valuable episode. And I also think this is going to be something that if you are starting to think, I really want to scale my jewelry reselling business, I really want to do this at the next level, I think you're going to find a lot of value in today's podcast as well. All right, so before we get into that, I do want to say that today's podcast episode is brought to you by Jewelry Bestie. Jewelry Bestie is your AI powered best friend that instantly helps you identify, describe, and price your jewelry. Jewelry Bestie can take you from jewelry novice to jewelry expert in minutes. If you'd like to know more, head on over to jewelrybestie.com. All right, so let's go ahead and get into today's topic because we're going to talk about all of the different, what should I say, experiences, the highs, the lows, the different situations you're going to encounter as a jewelry reseller. And the first thing I have here in my notes is, the reason why we all love to do this. Now, I know I love jewelry. It's one of the things that really gets me excited. I love wearing it. I love sourcing it. I love selling it, and I love collecting it. And yes, a lot of that did come into play when I made a decision to be a jewelry reseller. But first and foremost, when I got started doing this, I didn't even realize that this could be an actual business model. I just had a lot of jewelry that I wanted to sell because I needed the money, and I never really had a plan or a system or any type of structure in place. Now, when I was reselling many years ago, when I got started, I was an everything seller. And then I kind of looked at what I had at home that I could sell. And that's kind of how I got started, because I looked at my own jewelry collection and I realized that jewelry was a really good seller. still is. And that's really kind of what lit the fire for me. But I want to walk you through exactly, how to do this, because I know I get a lot of comments and I get a lot of messages and emails from you who are just getting started, or maybe you're already a reseller but you don't know how to add jewelry as part of your reselling strategy. So I really want to give you what you need in order to kind of carry through with that. All right. So, like I said, talking about why we get started with jewelry reselling, because we love it, right? It's easy to store. For the most part, it's easy to manage the inventory and organize it because it's so small. So I think I've shared this too, that I had about 3,000 jewelry pieces, and it only took about 4 feet of space in a spare bedroom that I have to store it. And that was a huge, huge attractive selling point for me, because I just didn't have the space nor the budget to rent storage, space for inventory. Plus, I just didn't want to do that. So that was one of the reasons that I decided to get, involved with reselling jewelry. Now, the thing is, too, is um, you're really going to have to figure out your why. And I know we're all doing this to make money, but there's a lot of ways to make money reselling. So we really have to get clear about why we are reselling jewelry specifically. All right. I shared with you because, it's small, it's easy to manage, but I also just really am passionate about it. Now, I know that can be a double-edged sword, because sometimes when you're passionate about something, it's hard to sell it and it's hard to let things go. But for the most part, we want to do something that we enjoy, right? Especially if it's going to be something we're going to do day in, day out. So make sure that you are clear about why you're doing this, and that this is something you can do long term. All right, because things change, things happen, and you want to make sure that you're doing something that is sustainable for you as an individual. Now, the other thing I have here too is that you may want to decide, if you are going to do this full time, long term, what is your niche or your platform strategy? Now, you don't have to have a specific niche within jewelry or niche. You can sell all types of jewelry. That's what I did for many years. It worked for me. However, as time went on, I realized that I made the most money selling vintage costume jewelry. Uh, but I had to kind of develop sourcing strategies, and we're going to talk about that, in order for me to sustain selling in that niche. So you're going to have to figure out, do you want to be like an everything jewelry reseller, or do you want to focus on specific pieces? Do you want to sell just one type of jewelry? And it can be anything that you can source, anything that you are knowledgeable about, or anything that you're willing to learn about. All right. So the other thing about that, depending on what your niche is or what type of jewelry you're selling, one platform may be better for you versus another. I know the majority of us do sell on eBay. That's where I have sold probably the most jewelry, but I've also sold quite a bit on Whatnot and Poshmark and District. So it just depends, what platform works for you. Get really secure on that, but also be willing to experiment too, because again, you're going to have to find something that you can do long term and something that makes sense for you. And also, you want a platform that you're comfortable with. I know not everybody is comfortable with Whatnot. Some people are very overwhelmed or intimidated by it. And you don't want to start off with that, right? You want to start off with something that is easy, something that makes sense for you, and something that's not going to be overwhelming when you're trying to learn. Okay, so think about that too. Now, you also want to have clear financial targets. I think I'm going to go into this a little bit more in depth a little bit later, but we're just kind of briefly going on the things to think about. So you want to figure out how much money you want to make per month, and then we're going to work backwards. That's probably the easiest way to do it. So if you want to make $2,000 a month, you want to break down how many pieces you need to sell each week or each day, how many pieces you need to list each week or each day, and what your budget is to continually source so you have enough jewelry pieces to list each week and each day. Okay, so again, working backwards seems to be the easiest way to do this. That's how I figure it out for myself. And it may, you may be flexible on this, because when you're first starting, most of us know we want to make, let's say, $1,000 a month, $5,000 a month, but we're not quite sure what the formula is to get us there. All right. And it's going to be different for you, and it's going to be different for me, depending on what type of jewelry pieces I want to source, how much time I have to invest in building a jewelry reselling business. Am I going to be doing this part time? Am I going to be doing this full time? Or what I like to say, am I going to be doing this all of the time? Because that's another way that you can do this. There was a point in time where I felt like this wasn't a full-time thing. This was an all-the-time thing, where every day, every waking moment, I was doing something with my jewelry reselling business. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that. However, when you're first getting started, you may want to devote a short period of time to that grind and hustle. It may not be for everybody, and I'm not saying that's the ideal way to do it, and I'm not saying that that's what you should do. I'm just sharing from experience. That's what I did, and it paid off. But there was a cost. I was very burnt out. My house was a wreck because I had jewelry boxes everywhere. I had shipping stuff everywhere. Um, it was chaos, but it wasn't for nothing, right? So, like I said, is this going to be part time, full time, or all the time? And you may kind of fluctuate between those, right? One season of your life, it may be part time, another season, it may be all the time. It just depends on you, and it depends on what you're doing. We also want to think about creating repeatable systems. Now, the systems I've talked about on this podcast, and I've done episodes specifically on my three-part system to have a long-term, sustainable, profitable jewelry reselling business. These are the three systems you want to have. You want to have a system for sourcing, right? You want to have that dialed in. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as well. You also want to have a system for selling. All right. How do you consistently sell your jewelry pieces? Is it by listing them on eBay? Is it by doing live shows on Whatnot? Whatever the case may be. And then you also want to have a system for shipping and service. And the service is customer service. Do you check your emails every day? Do you check them multiple times a day? Do you have your shipping supplies and the way you package and ship your jewelry pieces? Do you already have that figured out and dialed in? All right, so those are the three systems that you're going to want to make sure you have pretty solidly in place to create your jewelry reselling, business structure. All right, because you don't want to be guessing while you're doing this, while you're building this. You want to have this stuff figured out, right? So you can focus on basically running and maintaining your jewelry reselling business. Now, the other thing you want to think about too is developing your brand identity. And this doesn't have to be anything complicated. And it doesn't even have to be anything where you have this elaborate brand with the logo and all that. Now, you could do that, but that's not necessary. For many years, I was just good, great, fabulous, and I sold jewelry on eBay. And that was my brand. That was all I did. I may have talked about it a little bit on YouTube, maybe on Instagram or Facebook here and there, but that was all I did. I didn't have a logo. I didn't have, fancy packaging or anything like that. It was very simple. And that was what worked for me. Now, depending on if you're going to do this long term, you may want to build a recognizable brand with certain colors and branding and certain fonts that you use, maybe a website, whatever. You can do all of that too, but decide, what's going to work, because your name, your visuals, all of that will become recognizable once you start doing this consistently. All right. And of course, you can change it along the way. But I think it's good, because then you become known for something. And I think it's easier to market yourself and your jewelry when you are known for something, either a type of jewelry, maybe the type of shows, maybe the way you share what you're doing, whatever it may be. All right, consistency also equals credibility, so that's another reason why you may want to consider branding as well. All right, so one of the illusions when we're starting jewelry reselling is a lot of us think that it's going to be easy money, or it's going to be something where we just throw the jewelry up on eBay and it's going to sell. Now that could happen, but statistically it usually does not. So you want to come up with some type of, like I said, a system and realistic expectations. Because I do want to say this. For the most part, jewelry is not a fast seller. Now, there are pieces that are highly sought after and in demand that will sell quickly. But if you're doing this full time, you learn right away that not every piece sells immediately. And that's a where your selling system will come into play, because you're going to want to make sure you're listing consistently so you can sell consistently. That's how I did it. That's what worked for me. I was typically selling anywhere from average 10 to 15 jewelry pieces a day, and that was when I was listing 25 to 30 jewelry pieces a day. All right, so that was my kind of magic formula. I had to list about 25 to 30 pieces every day, and then I would sell about 10 to 15 jewelry pieces every day. And of course, these were at varying price points. So you may want to think about that too. If you want to have consistent daily sales, you need to have consistent daily listings. Now, when you're live selling, it's a little bit different, because it's not so much listing the jewelry, it's how many shows and how many items are you showing per show. So you're going to have to figure this out. It's going to be different for all of us, because we all don't have the same exact jewelry inventory, and we all don't have the same exact amount of jewelry that we are listing, sourcing, selling, whatever. So that's something that you're going to have to play with and figure out as you move through your business. Okay. Now, I have this in my notes too. Time is going to be the biggest cost, because not only is it the time it takes for you to source the jewelry and to list the jewelry, there's also going to be a learning curve, and that's going to take time, because in order to be knowledgeable about what pieces to pick up and then how to list them, that's going to take time. Of course, you can use a tool like Jewelry Bestie, and it will shorten, or in some cases eliminate, some of that learning curve for you. But if you don't want to use a tool like that, then yeah, it's going to take you some time to learn this. All right. And that's what I had to do. I had to study sold comps on eBay. I had to research. I had to watch YouTube videos. And of course, there's value in that too. So just understand that when you're getting started, a lot of your time is going to be spent studying jewelry, studying brands, studying platforms, studying what's selling and what's not selling. Photography. Learning how to take good jewelry photos is tricky. Now, the tricky part about photographing your jewelry pieces is that it's very different to photograph things when you're doing everything up close. Like if you're photographing clothing, you stand back, you hang it up or whatever you do, and then you take the photo. But with jewelry, you're doing everything at close range, and so that can be a little bit difficult to manage in the beginning, especially if you're using your phone or if you're using a camera and you got to change the settings. I think it's what macro settings, something like that. I'm not quite sure, but you know what I mean, right? So there's a learning curve with photographing jewelry, especially getting the lighting, especially getting the right angles. And if there's marks, if there's stamps, if there's hallmarks, if there's tags, whatever, if there's flaws, we want to make sure we get photos of that too. So understand it's going to take a little bit of time, but you can do it. It's not that complicated. It's just very different from photographing clothing, hard goods, or whatever. Okay. Learning your platform fees. I've done a whole podcast episode on which platforms are best for jewelry resellers, depending on what type of reseller you are, what type of business you are trying to run. One platform, just because it's the least expensive as it relates to fees, may not be the best platform for you. So I'm going to link that episode on this video and also in the show notes if you're listening. So that way you can go back and review that, because I do a breakdown of which platforms are not necessarily better, but I just kind of do a deep dive so that way you can figure out, okay, this works for me, this doesn't work for me when you're making a decision. And of course, you can list on multiple platforms, which I know a lot of us already do. All right, so let's get into the actual business plan, because I think this is what could be the make or break for your jewelry reselling business. All right, and I kind of already touched upon this. For the most part, you want to work backwards depending on what your financial goals are. Do you want to make $5,000 a month? Do you want to make $1,000 a month? Do you just want to make a couple $100s a month? Whatever. There's no right or wrong here. It's just what works for you. And then you want to define what your goal is beyond the money. And I say that because I think a lot of us think, okay, I just want to do this because I need to make a certain amount of money, but then what? Because once you kind of get into a rhythm where you hit those goals, you want to start thinking about, how do I maintain this? Is there a way I can take this to the next level? So maybe I only have to source once every few months because I'm able to, I've learned how to buy thousands of jewelry pieces at a time. Maybe you figure out, once I hit this goal and pay off that bill, I may want to scale back and do this part time. How will that transition look? Or maybe you say, I want to do this while I travel. Maybe you say, I want to do this only certain times of the year, whatever. So figure out your money and then figure out what the business is going to look like, because that's going to be really important when you start making decisions and when you start evaluating what's working for you and what's not. We talked about finding a niche if that applies to you. You can be flexible. You don't have to be locked into anything. Don't ever think that you can't change or pivot or make a different choice at any point in time in your business, okay? And you also want to figure out your pricing formula. This is huge because I've talked to a lot of jewelry resellers. They say, oh, well, I can't find really high-end jewelry pieces, so I have like some of these lower-end pieces and I'm going to sell them for $5 each. Now, that could work, but it's actually costing you more when you're selling pieces for $5 a pop, because you're not taking into account all of the thing that goes in, all of the steps that go into getting that $5 jewelry piece sold. That's why I always say never sell anything less than $10, even if you have to bundle items, because after your costs and your time, listing, sourcing, shipping, all of that, you may not have much left, especially if you're selling pieces for $5 each. Now, if you're doing this in a live show, that could be totally different, right? Especially if you're moving volume. But if we're talking about selling jewelry on a platform like eBay, you don't want to sell those pieces for $5 a pop on eBay, because after the fees and the time and all of that, you may make $3, $4, depending on what, exactly what it is, how much it's sold for, your shipping and all of that. All right, so your selling price has to cover your costs, your time, your fees, and still leave room for profit. Most people stop at just the cost. I've talked to so many resellers that just say, oh, I just want to make my money back. Well, no, you don't. You want to make a little bit more than that because of the time it takes going into getting that piece sold. So think about that. I'm not saying you can't have a thriving business selling $5 jewelry pieces. You can, but again, you may want to determine where you're going to sell that. Because I've done that. I've sold jewelry pieces for $5, $6, $7 a pop, but I've done them in Poshmark shows, whatnot shows, and then you're moving a lot more pieces. So for 1 hour of work, you could be making anywhere from maybe 70 to 200, $300, depending on how many pieces you move in that one show. So think about all of that. All right. Think about the actual cost and effort it takes to get the jewelry piece sold. You cannot. Well, here's another thing I have in my notes, because systems will actually give you a lot more freedom. Being disciplined will give you a lot more freedom. And I know it doesn't feel like it when you are doing this, but the structure will make things easy for you, because you're already going to know, oh, I'm selling this piece. I know I'm going to list it on eBay. I'm going to sell it for roughly about this much, and it should take approximately this long to sell. Now, you may not have those exact numbers, but you have an idea, right? And so when you have your systems in place, kind of making projections like that gets a little bit easier. All right, I've already talked about this. Jewelry Bestie can help with descriptions, pricing, and also tracking your inventory pieces. So you may want to consider using something like that. And remember, you can't scale things that are chaotic. Trust me, I know this from firsthand experience. You can't scale chaos. You can only scale clarity. You can only scale what you know, what you understand, because then you know exactly what the next logical step should and will be. All right. And I know I'm throwing a lot of information out there, but I hope this is making sense, because I really want you guys to start with a solid foundation to grow your jewelry reselling business, because you really can make money doing this. And this can be a long-term thing if you set it up right. And even if you make mistakes along the way, you can still recover by knowing exactly what parts of your business, need attention. Okay. Now, you want to prevent burnout before it starts. I didn't do this. I made the mistake because I think I was so hungry to make the money that, like I told you earlier, this was an all the time business for me at one point, where that was all I did whenever I wasn't doing something else, like, as it related to my responsibilities as a mom or whatever. Every spare moment I had was jewelry, and it was not good. Now, I did make a lot of money, I did, but like I said, it came at a cost. Now, here's another thing I have in my notes that trips up a lot of resellers. This is reinvesting. So you're going to have to budget for reinvesting into your business. Now, this was hard for me to grasp in the beginning, because I knew, let's say I wanted to make $100 a day, and I sold something and I made $100 that day. I was like, oh, right, I have $100 to spend. Well, no, I really didn't, because now I needed to buy more jewelry to replace the ones that just sold, so I can continue making $100 a day. All right. So think about that too, because you always want to pay yourself, but you always want to set money aside so you can buy more inventory. And I know this is really frustrating, because you think about, I just want to make the money, but then you realize the money you make has to go right back into the business. And it doesn't have to be all of it, because we're not doing this just basically to make money to put, to buy more jewelry. In the beginning, it will feel that way, but eventually you will be able to take a percentage and pay yourself, right? And to really figure out, okay, if I make $100 today, $50 goes back to buying new inventory, and then $50 goes into my account, or, however you do it. Stay flexible and future proof. Now, sometimes I think this is hard for a lot of jewelry resellers, because I know a lot of jewelry resellers kind of get stuck in the same habits and same patterns of doing things the way it's always been done, or doing things the way they've been doing it for years. And sometimes they don't have potential to see um, trends or how things are changing. And I'm noticing that a little bit right now, with the implementation of AI and with new technologies. I'm not saying that, all resellers have to use AI, but what I am saying is like, are you utilizing the tools and paying attention to the trends that can help you really grow your business at a much faster rate? And I saw this a lot with live selling. A lot of jewelry resellers did not want to do live selling. And so now more people, jewelry resellers are doing live selling, but in the beginning, not many wanted to do it. I don't know if it's because they didn't want to be on camera, whatever the case was, but that was the trend. The trend was to sell live, online live shopping. And I think it still is a growing trend and a, growing part of e-commerce. And now we have new trends using AI and other listing software and tools. And again, I see a lot of resellers are a little bit hesitant to at least explore this or try this or maybe adapt this to some degree in their business. But again, that's the way e commerce is going. And so being open minded to new trends, new technologies, new ideas is really going to set you apart. All right. I've been able to do this with my own reselling business. And when I was live selling a lot more, I want to say probably about a year and a half to 2 years ago, there wasn't really a whole lot of jewelry resellers. Now there's a ton. But when I was doing it consistently, there wasn't a whole lot, right? But now it's become a little bit more mainstream. So think about that. Jewelry trends do evolve. Be willing to test new styles, new formats, new ideas, because it's really going to set you apart. And sometimes you can be one of the first and one of the early adapters, so to speak, and it will definitely pay off long term. All right. So think about that. I'm not saying you have to change what you're doing now, but be open minded to how can I sell my jewelry faster, smarter, easier? How can I do something different? How can I leverage what nobody else is using right now? Because I think that's really going to be where reselling is headed, because the old model is quickly becoming, I don't want to say outdated, maybe saturated. I don't know. But the resellers who are learning how to use certain tools, I do believe are going to win this game long term. All right. So, again, just something to think about. Oh, I also have in my notes here too, platform shift. Keep learning new ways to sell, like I just talked about. Keep strategizing, keep researching, and keep experimenting. All right, so you want to create multiple streams of income. I'm huge on this. I've always been an advocate for this. I know a lot of resellers are not, which is surprising to me because a lot of resellers put all of their eggs in the eBay basket. Yes, maybe they may cross lists on multiple platforms, but other than that, they don't have anything else going on as it relates to creating multiple streams of income. All right. So I'm not going to get into all of the different things you can do, but you guys have probably noticed that I have my jewelry reselling business, but I also have this podcast, which is a very small income maker for me. But I also have digital products. I have a website. I also have a software tool that I just launched, which is another source of income. So think about other ways that you can make money. Oh, I just remembered I also do affiliate marketing. So think about other ways, because a lot of these other things that I do in addition to jewelry reselling, a lot of them make money on autopilot for me, right? So yes, I love reselling jewelry, but it's not the only thing that I'm doing in order to bring money in. And sometimes the platforms get really weird, right? Sometimes you won't make a lot of sales. but it's okay because you have other things, other irons in the fire, so to speak, that can bring you money and can bring you income. Okay, let's see. What else do I have that I want to share with you? All right, I kind of talked about diversifying. I have that in my notes. And this kind of just reiterates what I just said. Your reselling business should not rely on only one platform. We all know eBay is pretty, pretty tricky, pretty unpredictable at times. Whatnot, it's highs and lows, hit or miss with that platform as well. Own your audience, own your buyer base by either growing on social media in some way, maybe a YouTube channel, maybe an Instagram following, or email. You can also have an email list that you build consistently so you can connect with potential buyers or people who are interested in what you're doing, what you're selling. All right, always give yourself options. I think that's one of the things that I want to communicate really strongly is always give yourself options, because the day will come that you may not be able to do reselling at the level or the intensity that you initially thought you could. Things happen, life happens, so you want to give yourself some options, and you want to make sure that you always have a way to make money somehow, one way or another. So figure out how you can diversify your business. Maybe you can collaborate with other resellers. Maybe you can, like I said, grow a social media following, whatever makes sense for you. I also talked about this, embracing technology. Don't fear it. Be open minded. AI is not going to replace resellers. I don't think that at all. But I do think that AI can make what we do easier. All right. And finally, think beyond selling. Just because you're a jewelry reseller doesn't mean that the only thing you do is sell. Maybe you teach, maybe you write, maybe you consult, whatever. These are things that can also bring in some additional money, and you can leverage your jewelry reselling experience into other potential opportunities, kind of like what I've done. All right. So I think that, nowadays it's just so easy to really share knowledge and share information, especially something you're passionate about. You don't have to do it like I do it or anybody else. You can really do it your own way. And a lot of the things that you can leverage to share your information or your experience, a lot of these things are free or very low cost. All right. If you guys would like me to talk about how to diversify your income as a jewelry reseller, let me know. Leave a comment, because that's something I'm really passionate about, and I would love to share with you kind of how I've done what I've done, or what I'm doing, and maybe that may be helpful for you. So let me know if you're interested, and I can definitely do that. So here's the truth: anyone can start a jewelry reselling business. But the ones who really make this successful are the ones who treat their business like an actual, and I hate to say this, but I don't know any other way to describe it, an actual like living entity. Your business has a life of its own. It has a pulse. It has a process that you really need to be tapped in with, right? And you need to see your jewelry business as a viable source of money for you, and really look at it as something that is living, growing, and hopefully thriving to some degree. All right. So if you've been running on impulse or guessing, or maybe just hoping that things work out, I think this episode is your sign to really strategize and to make some hard decisions about what you want your business to be. And, sometimes it's hard to figure that out, especially when you've never done this before. It's hard to have a clear, direction or idea about well, I don't know what a successful jewelry reselling business would look like for me. And if that is you, like I said, you want to start with maybe how much money you want to make, because you would consider it a success if, let's say, you were making $100 a day and that was your goal, and you were constantly, consistently hitting that. That's a success. All right. So figure out what success looks like to you. And like I said, work backwards from there. Okay. So that is what I got for you, jewelry friends. So, what do you think? you know, are you building a sustainable jewelry reselling business? Are you just getting started? Are you kind of in the midst of growing and you're trying to figure out what's next to take your business to the next level? I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to know. If you're willing to share, leave me a comment so we all can, learn from each other and see what's working and what's not working. I know for me, my next steps are really to develop some more things that I think will support jewelry resellers in making money. And that's my goal, is to help you all do what you do better. All right. And because I know it's not easy. And I know for jewelry resellers, there's not a whole lot of information for us, tools for us, um, direction, guidance. There's not a whole lot out there. So my passion and my goal is to, fill those gaps for what jewelry resellers need in order to help them do what they do, and in order to help them sell more jewelry and in turn make more money. So that's going to be it for this episode, jewelry friends. I hope that you found this information helpful. I also want to say, if you're not subscribed, please make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Or if you are listening, please make sure you follow on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. And if you have any ideas for future topics you'd like me to cover, please don't hesitate to let me know that too. All right, jewelry friends, thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I'll check in with you again really soon.